What's going on YouTube? This is SG1 Sports and it's time for the playoff eliminator after week 7. Normally I do this video on Mondays, but because of the midseason predictions this year, I've gotten off just a little bit, but we're going to do this today and then the upset alert video coming up next. So let's get right into it. I think the playoff picture is becoming much more clear after this past weekend. So let's go to the teams. First, just a reminder, these are the teams that we've already eliminated. And we may have to start a new category called back from the dead, because some teams I've eliminated may still have a chance. The way it's going, a 2-loss team could get in. So we'll monitor that and see how it goes into the future. Only 4 new teams eliminated this week. Our number of contenders are really shrinking down, so we're not going to see many eliminations. Georgia Tech, Texas Tech, Auburn, and Utah all lost their second game of the season. So those 4 teams now are out of it. Now let's go ahead and we're going to do it a little bit different this week. These are the teams that I think still need some help. Oklahoma State, Washington, Washington State, Kentucky, and Virginia. Oklahoma State, Washington, and Washington State all just have a really weak non-conference schedule, so I think that could hurt them even if they went out. Kentucky and Virginia, I think it's just more of a perception thing. Even if Kentucky wins the SEC championship, you know, I don't know. Will the committee say it's Kentucky? I don't know. I feel like, and partially it's just because I just don't see Kentucky or Virginia getting there, so that's why they're in this category. I can't consider them a top contender. I mean, yeah, if they went out, they have a probably. I mean, they probably would be in, but it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, I just don't see Kentucky or Virginia winning out. So here are our top contenders, and we're going to break this down into 4 categories, 4 different. The 4 spots, the 4 playoff spots. All right, so the first spot, it's going to go, it looks like, you know, as of right now, if everything goes according to plan, it's going to go to the winner of Alabama and Georgia in the SEC championship. Even with, you know, a loss to Auburn, I think Georgia gets the SEC championship. So I think that this game will decide that top spot, probably that number 1 seed in the playoffs. So it's going to be Alabama or Georgia, whoever wins that SEC championship game. So that's our spot. That's number 1 spot. The number 2 seed, this is just how I feel like these seeds could be switched around, but I think it's going to go to the winner of the Big Ten. It's going to be Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, or Wisconsin. I think Ohio State has the easiest path to get there if they can take care of business and win that game at home against Penn State. It's going to be tough, but I think all 5 of these teams still control their own destiny. I think that the only team you might say would maybe need a little help is Michigan State because of their loss to Notre Dame. If it comes down to Michigan State, Notre Dame, I think they would put Notre Dame ahead because of the head-to-head matchup. Wisconsin cannot afford a loss. The schedule is way too weak for them. But, again, if all these teams, if they win out, I think that they will be in the playoffs and likely getting that number 2 seed. But, again, that's just, you know, the seeds don't really matter at this point, so don't read too much into that. Please don't criticize me because you are nitpicking over something like that. All right, so here, that's what I think is going to maybe go to the 2 seed or the 2nd spot. The 3rd spot here, I think, is going to be the winner of the ACC. And I think Clemson, Miami, NC State, and Virginia Tech all look to have a legitimate chance to win the ACC. Miami, I don't think they can afford a loss because they have a pretty weak schedule. I mean, it's really not that bad. The other 3 teams already have a loss, so obviously they can't afford another loss. So I think that 3rd spot is going to go to one of these 4 teams. Okay, so I think that's pretty, you know, I really feel confident that that's how the first 3 spots are going to go. They're going to go to the SEC champion, the Big Ten champion, and the ACC champion. Now, how about the other spot? Who gets that 4th spot? I think it's going to be potentially TCU or Oklahoma if they win out and win the Big 12 championship. I think they would probably be first in line, especially TCU because they'd be undefeated. Oklahoma would have a loss against Ohio State, so I think they'd have a real good case as well. USC and Notre Dame, they play this weekend. I think that the loser of that game is going to be out. The winner of that game really has a good chance to get this spot if the Big 12 teams don't get it. And then also Georgia and Penn State. We've already mentioned them, but I think they are the 2 teams that have the best chance to get in the playoffs even without winning their conference. To me, I really feel like those are maybe the only 2 teams that can do that. I know it. I'm not going to say they're the only 2 teams, but they're the clear 2 teams. I mean, Georgia goes undefeated, loses to Alabama in the SEC championship. I think they would have a really good argument, especially if it comes down to them and Notre Dame, because they beat them head-to-head. Penn State, the one loss that they were to lose to Ohio State, that's a good loss. I don't think they get in over at a Big 12 champion, TCU undefeated, or a one-loss Oklahoma. But if TCU loses a game, if Oklahoma loses 2 games, I do think they maybe sneak in there. And I also don't think Penn State would get in over a one-loss USC Pac-12 champion, and I don't think Georgia would either. So if you had to rank these teams based off of their chances to get in, I'd say TCU obviously number 1 because they're undefeated. They go undefeated, they are in. The second spot I think is probably going to go to. It would really be a tie. I mean, USC and Oklahoma. If both teams there win their conference with just 1 loss, how do you pick USC versus Oklahoma? I think it's probably going to go to Oklahoma because they have the loss to Ohio State, so their loss is better. Because if you can compare wins, I think the wins would be pretty much even comparing those 2 teams. All right, so I think those 2 teams would be next in line, and then I think you'd have to go with Georgia next because I think they're going to be ahead of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head matchup, and then you'd have Penn State and Notre Dame. They would be very even. So I don't think it's going to come down to this, but if it does, if we get a clear Alabama number 1, if we get a clear Clemson, and we get a clear Ohio State, those 3 teams, are definitely in the playoffs, then I think the final spot comes down to these teams right here. And how does it play out? That's a good question. Obviously, these teams are not all going to win. Like I just said, USC and Notre Dame play this weekend. They will eliminate each other. TCU has a chance to eliminate Oklahoma. So I think it's very likely that the Pac-12 eliminates itself. I think Notre Dame may lose a game. They get eliminated. I think the Big 12 also eliminates itself. I think TCU is going to lose at least 1 game, even though they are rolling right now. So I personally feel like that final spot is going to come down to Georgia or Penn State. I think Alabama is going to get in. I think they're going to win the SEC championship. And again, everything I've showed you up to this point is based off of facts, what we've actually seen happen, and what is going to happen in the future. I haven't really put my personal opinion on anything. This is just how I think it will go. I'm saying if this happens, this will happen. So I'm not giving a prediction for myself. But if I was going to predict it, I think that Alabama gets in. I think that I don't know. It's very tough to predict, and I haven't really decided 100% sure how I think everything's going to go because I'm going to do my playoff predictions on Friday. But I think that Clemson and NC State, I think if Clemson wins that game, I think they will continue on and they will get in. If NC State wins, I think maybe Miami gets in there. I think maybe the winner of the Miami-Virginia Tech gets in there because I think the winner of that game will beat NC State in the ACC Championship. So I really don't like NC State to get to the playoffs, but I do think if they can beat Clemson, obviously they're into the ACC Championship. Okay, so I think, maybe Clemson gets there if they get things figured out. If not, maybe it's Miami or Virginia Tech. I do like Ohio State to go on and win the rest of their games, get to the Big Ten championship game, win it, move on to the playoffs. But it could very easily be Penn State. I mean, if Penn State just wins that game against Ohio State, it is a clear path for them. Ohio State would be eliminated. So Penn State, I think, has a real good chance. And again, if you look at these final teams, TCU and Oklahoma, I feel like they're going to eliminate themselves. Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe TCU runs the table. An undefeated TCU Big 12 champion gets in over a one-loss Georgia or Penn State if they are not conference champions. That's how I feel. I don't think they're going to put in a one-loss non-conference or even a one-loss conference champion. I don't think would get in over TCU. So I think TCU maybe still has a chance to. I mean, they might still do it. Obviously, they have a chance. They went out. They are in. TCU is the only team on this last page that controls their destiny. Okay, so TCU would be in, obviously, if they went out. But I think the Big 12 is going to beat up on itself. I think USC and Notre Dame, the loser of that game will be out. I think either way, I think USC will lose another game. I think Notre Dame will lose another game. So for me personally, I think that final spot comes down to TCU, Georgia, or Penn State. So who would get in that scenario? TCU's undefeated. They're in, obviously. Georgia and Penn State, that's going to be a tough argument. Georgia has probably the better resume, so I probably have to give the nod to Georgia there. But it would be very close, especially, you know, if Georgia gets in to the SEC championship and they lose to Alabama in a close game. Yeah, I would say Georgia would get in over Penn State. And don't count this theory out. We could see Alabama and Georgia, Ohio State and Penn State. We could see 2 SEC teams and 2 Big Ten teams. Let's say Miami loses to Notre Dame. Notre Dame loses a couple games. They get eliminated. And Miami goes on to win the ACC championship. With one loss, I don't think Miami gets in because the schedule is just, it's too weak for them. I think a one-loss Georgia or Penn State would get in over Miami. I don't know. Then again, if you look at Miami, if they win the ACC, if they get another win, say over a Clemson team, it's just it's crazy right now because we don't know what's going to happen. I'm trying to throw out all these theories for what could happen, what might happen. But at the end of the day, you go back to the how I started this video. It's going to be Alabama, Georgia. It's going to be the Big Ten champion. It's going to be the ACC champion, probably. No guarantee there. But I could say almost with certain that the Big Ten champion and the SEC champion will be in. So those final 2 spots, that's where it's going to get crazy. Will we see another Big Ten team? Will we see another SEC team? Will we see a Big 12 team, an ACC team? It's gonna be a lot of fun. I think there's going to be more upsets. I think all of this stuff that we think is going to happen is probably not going to happen. It's going to be crazy. The only team that I feel really confident about is Alabama. Honestly, I don't see them losing. Maybe they lose to Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Maybe they lose in the SEC championship. Even with a loss there in the SEC championship, it's going to be tough to keep Alabama out. But other than that, I think it's going to be crazy down the stretch here as we get ready for what is the most exciting time in sports. And that is the final push to the playoffs here in college football. So what are your thoughts on this week's eliminations and who you think is going to get in the playoffs, all that? Go ahead and leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.